All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today I had something completely different planned to talk about, an absolutely brand new case that I had never mentioned before on this channel, but instead, I'd been receiving a lot of comments on the OJ Simpson uploads, and somebody had recommended that I check out the Porkins Policy Radio series. And I guess it started out as a radio show, but of course, it's converted into a podcast and uploaded onto YouTube like so many of them do. And they do so much about O.J. Simpson. So a lot of things came in about O.J. all at once, and I thought we have to do another upload on the case of O.J. Simpson about some of these things. The Porkins Policy Radio puts out I guess you'd say that they put out things arguing in favor of OJ's innocence. And that brings us to where we are today. This is actually a very large movement on the internet. I mean, you could call them the OJ truthers, if you will. That name has come up before. So, a lot of people just really do not believe that OJ Simpson committed the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman back in 1994. And this is one of the cases that's so difficult to get away from. I mean, we have cases that pull people in, like the Zodiac Killer, the disappearance of Maura Murray, the disappearance of Brandon Lawson, that people just get really absorbed into. But those things all have never had a trial. The suspects have not been completely apprehended. They haven't gone through anything like O.J. Simpson, where there's been a trial, there's been a verdict. And still, though, people just are unsatisfied with what happened. There's just something about the O.J. Simpson case that people can't get away from. And that brings us to where we are today. The first thing we should say is that I was listening to one of the interviews they did on that Porkins Policy Radio show, and they were interviewing none other than F. Lee Bailey, like one of the defense attorneys for OJ back in the trial. And I was like, at first I thought it was just going to be they were going to talk about his theories and just talk about him, like his role in the case. But no, they interviewed him for the show and he appeared there. And I've mentioned F. Lee Bailey's theory about this before on the channel. And F. Lee Bailey proposed that OJ did not commit the murders, that this was the result of the drug connections at La Mezzaluna. This was the result of the drug connections of Nicole Brown Simpson and Faye Resnick. We should also note that O.J. Simpson insisted upon this back in 1996, 97, all the way up to the early 2000s when people were still asking those questions during the interviews. He just pointed in on Faye Resnick. I mean, just you ask him, well, if you didn't commit the murder, who did? And he's like, it had to be someone connected to Faye Resnick. Faye Resnick, of course, was the close friend of Nicole Brown Simpson, and if what they say is correct, F. Lee Bailey and the people interviewing him say is correct, then Faye Resnick owed some people $30,000, around that sum of money. She wasn't able to pay it back, so then they went after her. This was like something related to owed debts, drug connections, and someone owed $30,000. Okay, but why wasn't Faye Resnick dead, and why is Nicole Brown Simpson dead? Well, Faye Resnick wasn't around then. She was in rehab, and some people have said that she went to rehab the day of the murders, like in the morning, and then other people have insisted that no, it was 3 days earlier. I don't really look too deeply into that because it doesn't change the salient point. Faye Resnick would have been in rehab. So these two guys, they were just like kind of low-ranking hitmen, and I do say two because there's a reason for that. So two people go after this woman. They think that Faye Resnick and Nicole Brown Simpson are one and the same. They killed Nicole by mistake. That's not my theory. That's not my theory. That's the F. Lee Bailey theory in a nutshell. He presents it a little bit more glamorously than I do, a little bit more eloquently. But in short, that's what F. Lee Bailey argues, that Nicole Brown Simpson was murdered in a case of mistaken identity. Really, they were trying to get Faye Resnick. I mean, Both of them frequented La Mezzaluna, and Nicole was also connected to the kind of cocaine dealings in La Mezzaluna. And I've said before, if you think that sounds outrageous, it's not. Rich people in Los Angeles doing cocaine, that's not crazy. But what do we make about all this stuff? What about the mountains of evidence regarding O.J. Simpson? Well, as I mentioned, lots of comments have been coming in, and they had a very big discussion on this with F. Lee Bailey about the Bruno Mali shoes. I'm glad he still pronounces it Bruno Magli because I did too. For the longest time, I called them Bruno Magli shoes. Now I say Bruno Mali. Both are okay according to me. I mean, but the Bruno Mali shoes that are supposedly hook, line, and sinker. OJ was guilty. OJ was at the crime scene. What these guys say is that we have a footprint of OJ at the crime scene wearing his Bruno Mali shoes, and it's like they're like there's a photo of him wearing a shoe with the exact same tread, the exact same print, and they're like those photos were doctored. Absolutely, they were doctored. Those weren't OJ shoes. This is all planted. This is all set up. It is completely framed. OJ didn't do it. This was the work of, once again, two sloppy hitmen who were associated with the drug connections at La Mezzaluna, and they got the wrong woman. That's what they say. I have a big thing to say about doctored photos. I mean, I'm not an expert on photography, but what I was told back in college, I only ever took one journalism course, and what I was told with that was to always be aware when people are accusing someone of doctoring photos. They're saying when photos are published in a newspaper, they go through an engraving process. They're sent to the photo engraver. They find out whether an image is genuine or it has been doctored. Newspapers and magazines, these people examine that stuff for it. Because, say, for example, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, they don't want to put out fake photos. So they go to the photo engraver, and it can be done. They're always done. And we know with certainty that the images of OJ wearing the Bruno Mali shoes were not. I mean, they were published in a wide variety of places. That was a published photo that had been distributed all over the East Coast, all over the country, pretty much. We can say all over America. It's a very low chance that that photo was doctored the way that they say it was. I was just told that, I mean, to say that a newspaper is just going to put out a doctored photo for no particular reason, I mean, because this is before the murders would have occurred. So, my short story is I don't believe the line about OJ's Bruno Mali shoes being doctored in the photos. And that's one of the biggest pieces of evidence that tied him to the civil trial. Although F. Lee Bailey does mention that Marcia Clark knew about the shoes, she just didn't go forward about it. And the short story for that is, I mean, not his story, but the short story for that is Marcia Clark did not really conduct the trial very well. She didn't conduct the prosecution very well. And of course, Chris Darden is to blame as well. But the biggest thing that I'm noticing with all of this is I really feel that sometimes people are over exaggerating certain points. But we had a very interesting comment also about the Bruno Mali shoes. When someone just asked the question to me, why would OJ wear his $400 shoes and dress socks as opposed to any of the other things he had in his closet, like the Reeboks? Why would he wear them to go murder his wife? And there's another question tied to that. Why was he eating hamburgers with Kato Kalin 45 minutes before the murder? Excuse me. Well, I'm a believer that this was not something planned. This was not something premeditated. This was not something calculated. I mean, I do believe maybe OJ went over to Nicole's house to confront her. Maybe he went over to say something, or perhaps there's even that bigger theory that he went to slash her tires. But I said, though, it's like, once you're getting at that point, did he go there to just yell at her, or did he go to cut up her tires? That's kind of like micromanaging things too much. That's getting too involved with mind reading. But I don't necessarily believe that OJ went there to murder her. I don't believe that. If you've heard my previous uploads on this channel, you can sort of hear that I was saying the theory that I kind of disagree with F. Lee Bailey, and I was believing that OJ committed the murders, but he had an accomplice involved with him. Now, why would he wear the $400 shoes? Because it wasn't exactly planned. I mean, he didn't go there intentionally to murder his wife. I mean, we've talked about a variety of motivations that could have tipped him off that made him super angry, such as there could have been like a gathering at La Mezzaluna, and Nicole was specifically told, "Do not invite OJ. We don't want him here." That's one story they put out. The other one is Jason Simpson, Jason Lamar Simpson. That's right. Had the dispute with Nicole that she was supposed to show up at his restaurant with 10 friends, and she didn't show up. We're talking about the restaurant Jackson's, not La Mezzaluna. She was supposed to go to Jackson's to see the restaurant where Jason worked as a chef, try his food, but she didn't show up. So then he could have called OJ and said, "Hey, I can't believe Nicole did this to me. I don't believe this." And OJ's like, "Okay, I'm gonna have a word with her." Because one of the big things though, and this is also all written in the book, if I did it, the O.J. Simpson book, which was ghostwritten, but it's based on a series of interviews with O.J. And what they're saying about that is that the guy Charlie was actually the one to tell O.J., "You got to see what's going on at you got to see what's going on at Nicole's house." Yeah, I believe that's what happened. They have to say, "You got to see what's going on at Nicole's house," and this Charlie guy, who's anonymous, that's just a moniker, just a pseudonym. So they go over to Nicole's house to see what's going on. OJ says very clearly there was an accomplice, and he also says that they just carried knives in the car. There was at least one knife in the car. He's like, they always had it because it was less problematic than carrying a gun. It was easier to go about it than carrying a gun in the car. In short, like, if there were no legal implications or legal problems that would come from carrying guns in the car, they would have done it. But there are. So it was just easier to carry a knife. I believe they kept it under the passenger side seat normally. So we have a reason why the knife is there. We have a reason why OJ goes to Nicole's house. We know, though, that nothing was going down at her house, and I've said this stuff on the podcast before, so I'll be very quick. We know that there was no actual problem at Nicole's house because she wasn't home. She was at La Mezzaluna that night. She forgot her glasses there. Ron Goldman showed up at the house to bring her glasses to her. And they actually belonged to her mother, right? So, if we look at all of that, then I mean, that just seems like it seems like a much stronger narrative than what F. Lee Bailey is talking about. That two guys tried to kill Faye Resnick for the drug money, but they got the wrong woman? I mean, I would say, though, that in that particular podcast, it might have even been F. Lee Bailey talking. Someone was mentioning it. There are multiple people who participate in a podcast. They brought up a very interesting point when they said that when they found the glove at OJ's house, we're not talking about the glove at the crime scene, when they found the glove at Rockingham, the blood on it was still wet, but supposedly it would have been sitting there for 6 hours. But it's like, they were like, blood cannot sit on a glove and stay wet for 6 hours. It had to have been kept in a plastic bag, and it had to have been dropped there, and it was probably only sitting there for a maximum of 2 hours. They're completely in line that the blood evidence was planted. The blood evidence was staged. I'll just say one thing about that, and I brought this up to people before, and I mentioned this on the podcast before. The biggest thing to say is OJ lied in 1996 during the famous 96 interview where he's wearing that sort of yellow goldenrod sweater. when he said the blood evidence in the Bronco was not visible to the human eye. Like, you couldn't just look in the Bronco and see the blood evidence. Blatant, bold-faced lie. You could see at least one drop on the outside of the door, under the driver's side handle, and the blood evidence is painfully visible inside the car. If he didn't do it, why would he lie about something like that? And also, OJ, by the admission of F. Lee Bailey, owned a pair of Bruno Mali slippers, which, I mean, so we know he had Bruno Mali stuff. And they were like, people have actually gone through the entire history of this shoe company. We're on the shoes again. And they were like, they didn't have a single receipt, order, anything that Bruno Mali had shown that OJ had purchased the shoes that left the print at the crime scene. I repeat, they have no orders, receipts, any documentation that OJ had purchased those shoes. Now, if I recall correctly, much like the gloves, I believe they were a gift from Nicole. I mean, there definitely were. The gloves were definitely a gift. I believe there was one pair that was given to Jason and one pair was given to OJ of the gloves. But I really do remember, if I'm remembering correctly, I was told that the Bruno Mali shoes were a gift. The biggest thing that I would just like to say is I don't necessarily believe that OJ went there definitively to kill Nicole. I don't think that he had to plan anything. I don't think that this was a calculated thing. I can even accept that this little discussion with Charlie actually happened. Once again, Charlie could be Jason Simpson, but I don't really go down that road. I think Charlie is someone who is unidentified. I think Charlie is somebody who was, just as OJ says, a friend that he had met recently and started, spending time with recently. After the murders, Charlie just lays low. So we got to look at some other things. I believe, though, that OJ fabricated the story completely about Charlie saying there's something going down at Nicole's house, because not only was Nicole not home, but perhaps he just wanted to protect Jason Simpson. I mean, like, if Jason made the phone call, said, something happened, Nicole didn't show up at my restaurant, I'm angry. Yeah, okay. William Deere might have had some good instinct about Jason being somewhat implicated. I'd even entertained the possibility before that Jason could have been in the car, Jason could have been the getaway driver, that Charlie and OJ walk out. I mean, people have talked about that. That in the accomplice theory, that is not outrageous. There could have been two people with OJ, not just one. But what I would say is most likely is that, in fact, I'm almost certain Jason did not deliver the fatal blows that killed Nicole and Ron, and Jason was not involved in any fist fighting or altercations with Ron, and definitely not with Nicole. Definitely not with Nicole Simpson. So, where does that leave us? I guess I'm putting forward the theory that I think F. Lee Bailey is kind of, he's either going with a theory that he genuinely believes and is refusing to back down from it, or he is coming at this from a different angle just to get some notoriety. A point, though, that was made in this, that he made on Porkins Policy Radio was, it takes 20 minutes to drive from Bundy, where the murders were, to Rockingham, from Nicole's place to OJ's place. And I was like, wow, 20 minutes? I never really thought of it like that. I had no idea it was so far. And somebody actually called him out on that in the comments section, and they posted a video on where they're saying that is blatantly false. You can see it here in live time. It takes 6 minutes. 6 minutes. If you obey the traffic laws, you do not speed, you do not run the red lights, you do not run the stop sign. Sadly, the video is from Philip Van Adder, but still, it's like, it's shown that there are numerous routes that you can use to go from Bundy to Rockingham in 6 minutes. F. Lee Bailey's exact statement was, it's 20 minutes away, but you can do it in 12. And they're like, no, absolutely not. 6 minutes. And the person who called F. Lee Bailey out on that was like, earlier on, Bailey is saying that if someone's lying about one thing, maybe they're lying about the whole thing. Well, look at that. He's grossly exaggerated and miscalculated the time frame. He's grossly misrepresented the time frame. Maybe he's misrepresenting everything just because he's involved with numerous book deals. I mean, is he just trying to drum up things for his new career as a writer since he's been disbarred? I don't know about that. But what I can say is, I did not hear a single thing that would convince me that this was anything associated with the drug cartels, that this was anything associated with Jason Simpson being the murderer. And I think I said very clearly what I genuinely believe still, that OJ had an accomplice involved with this. And I don't subscribe to the Jeffrey Toobin theory that an accomplice is out of the question. Also, some people are saying that there was a set of fingerprints that was messed up. They're saying that there was a fourth person's DNA at the crime scene. And although I mentioned though, somebody asked me the question, why would OJ wear the Bruno Mali shoes to murder his wife? Why was he eating burgers with Kato Kalin? And like, there's a fourth question, and that was kind of just sort of asking about like the time frame. But like, we also need to sort of the biggest question though, even bigger than the time frame, is why wasn't Nicole's DNA, or sorry, why wasn't OJ's DNA found under Nicole's fingernails? Like, I mean, if they got into this horrible altercation, wouldn't they have his DNA under her fingernails? I'm not sure. But one of the big things we want to know about what happened to all the evidence. What I would say that it happened to the evidence is most likely. Apparently, people have a video of OJ shoving bags into a trash receptacle at the airport. Then that stuff just went to the landfill. That sounds plausible to me. In the past, I was really just looking at the instead of two people, two knives. I was thinking there were two people there, but only one knife was used. Like, one guy's fighting Ron Goldman, and then OJ is the one who actually does the stabbings. Although it's really been brought to my attention numerous times that there were multiple kinds of stab wounds. The knife could have, some of them were with a double-sided blade, and others were with a single-sided blade. So we have two people, two knives. I think that's possible, but I don't think that that necessarily changes anything. I think what's much more important is that there were two people and that were at the crime scene. One guy's fighting Ron, OJ is in the altercation with Nicole, and then Ron is finished off second. And I believe that footprint that OJ left at the crime scene is genuine. The doctored photo saying, I don't buy that for a second. But if you have anything to contribute about that, I mean, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a photo engraving specialist. If you have anything to say about that, I would love to hear something. Once again, I really didn't expect to be doing an OJ upload today. It's just that people had been raising questions, and I thought we would try and actually answer some of that. And I would also really kind of put some doubts on F. Lee Bailey's entire angle with this. He put out a challenge to people who talk about the case, very specifically armchair investigators like yours truly, and also like you guys, who are thinking about the case and trying to understand this. For us, who are just like not involved firsthand the way that F. Lee Bailey was, or Robert Shapiro, or Barry Scheck, or any of them. For them, he's just like, go on my website, read everything, read my 17,000 words I wrote about it before you ask any questions. But the problem is, F. Lee Bailey is so slanted and so questionable. It's very difficult for us to take him with 100% seriousness, or 100% credibility, or 100% integrity. And that's where we are now. At least that's where I'm at with F. Lee Bailey. I just don't see the overwhelming pile of evidence that pushes people to the drug connections. Oh, the drug connections are very big. And I was actually advised to check out the Porkins Policy Radio podcasts because they were talking about someone questioned some of the comments that I had made about the Bruno Mali shoes. We spent about 12 or 13 minutes only talking about OJ's footwear tonight. I would hope we've raised a certain degree of I've put forth, kind of a rebuttal to some of those things. I don't believe that he went there specifically to kill Nicole, so it wouldn't have mattered what kind of shoe he was wearing. I don't think he went there specifically to kill Nicole, so it wouldn't have mattered if he had been eating burgers with Kato Kalin. Some guy's just like, hey, let's say Jason calls OJ. He's like, hey, Nicole let me down. All right, well, I'm going to go over there. So he just gets in the Bronco and drives there. Maybe Charlie's with him. Maybe Charlie's not with him yet. Who knows? I don't believe that this was a gross, calculated murder. I believe that this was a gross, uncalculated murder. It's not super premeditated. It just kind of got out of hand. And as they mentioned, there was always the knife in the car. What do you think? What do you really think happened? If you have anything to say at all, what do you think about the theory that we're dealing with multiple attackers as opposed to just OJ? Do you have anything to say at all about any of the things that I put forward today?